Okay, welcome to chapter 21. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about evolution, specifically Darwin's story and the evidences used to help support evolution. So everybody recognizes this familiar caricature of Darwin, often depicted as the person who described that man came from monkeys. And we know that that's simply not a real depiction of Darwin's contribution to science. So what Darwin should be credited with is his concept of descent with modification or evolution. And evolution, you may recall, is the primary unifying concept in biology, describing how life's wonderful biodiversity on our earth exists, while at the same time describing the unity found among all living things. Now, the basic premise for this is that the earth is a dynamic place, it's ever changing, and in order for life as a whole to survive, it too must adapt and change. So this kind of presents an interesting parody. Life doesn't really like change. Remember from last semester, homeostasis describes the processes by which living things try to maintain an internal state of constancy. But if we look at this on a grand scale, as the earth changes, living things must simply find a way to cope with those changes. Now, evolutionary change is not seen at the individual level. It's only noticed over time as individual organisms develop adaptations. Now, these adaptations don't exist at the individual level, yet it's the individuals that slowly begin to adapt, and we see this in the population. Now, this occurs very slowly and takes many generations to develop. So this is where we're going in this chapter. So to talk a little bit about the history of evolutionary thought, many people are content to let Darwin have all the credit for the concepts and ideology behind evolution. However, we need to look beyond or perhaps before Darwin to realize the true impact of the evolutionary of evolution on the intellectual revolution that impacted biology. So we can go all the way back to Aristotle as an early philosopher who, while he did not have a lot of understanding of science, he did understand that living things could be placed in what he called the scala natura, kind of placing them or arranging them on a scale based upon their increasing complexity. And from Aristotle's time until really the 16 or probably even the 1700s, not a whole lot of thought was given into understanding evolution. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We needed to have a basic understanding for the concept of biology, literally the discovery of cells and human anatomy, etc. But there were some other reasons related to, especially in Western civilization, the church and its governing body over most all things. So in the 1700s, Carolus Linnaeus, a Swedish scientist who is often credited as being the father of taxonomy, described the science of naming and classifying organisms, and he developed a hierarchical system of classification that we still use today. We learned this in 1406. Domain, followed by kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, moving from the very broad to the most specific, taxon. And he also developed this system of binomial nomenclature that we use today, where each individual species is given a unique two-part scientific name. In this case, for the common wood duck, its scientific name is Aix sponsa, Aix being the genus and sponsa being the specific epithet. Now, following this, we see geologists beginning to have an impact on the history of evolutionary thought. James Hutton came up with this idea called gradualism, which is this idea that profound change can take place through slow but cumulative effects of slow but continuous processes. So an example of this is how a valley forms by the slow and constant action of a river as it's eroding across the stream bed. The key here is that geologic change can have an effect on the earth, and it can happen very, very slowly, but in a continual fashion. Another influencer was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He introduced two key principles, use and disuse, which is the idea that parts of the body that are used or extensively are larger and stronger, while lesser utilized parts sort of deteriorate. We know that this isn't really true. Does not explain why a giraffe's neck is long, because it's simply trying to reach the tops of the acacia trees for leaves. But we do know that inheritance of acquired characteristics, which was his second concept, is true in that organisms pass along traits to their offspring. And so the reason why a giraffe's neck is long is because its parent's neck was long. Another important geologist, in fact, this person mixed the study of geology and biology because he studied fossils. Georges Cuvier is often known as the father of paleontology. Fossils, of course, are the remains of are traces of organisms from the past. And by studying fossils, he began to understand that the deeper the strata, or the layers of sedimentary rock, the more dissimilar the fossils are to current life. And he also began to notice that there were these gaps or places in the fossil record where there were extinctions, removal of large numbers of species or organisms. And he referred to this concept of mass extinctions as catastrophism. Now, each of these individuals had an influence on the life of a young scientist from Shrewsbury, England, named Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was born in 1809 and he died in 1882. He was trained at Cambridge as a botanist. Botanists study plants. And one of his first jobs was to be the naturalist on the HMS Beagle. At 22 years of old, in 1831, the Beagle set forth to document and chart the poorly known stretches of the South American coastline. And one of their main stops on this voyage was going to be an archipelago off the western coast of South America called the Galapagos Islands. Now, this voyage lasted approximately 5 years. And again, these voyages were being done to help explain the natural history of not only living things on different continents, but this was also a major part of expansionism that was occurring in Western civilization at the time.